Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the Ontario provincial election post-mortem. So, the election results are, for the most part, in. We still have Kiwatanuga up here, who has a few precincts outstanding. Or at least that is what Elections Ontario's website is making me believe. But considering the number of voters in Kiwatanuga is quite low, it's not going to meaningfully change the percentage results for either even or for all of Ontario or even for Northern Ontario by itself. And naturally, it's not going to affect the riding itself because the Ontario candidate has blown out the riding. The NDP candidate has blown out the riding. So there's still a few precincts left, but the odds of it changing the result are effectively zero. So with that, I don't see any more need to delay this video. We will get into what has occurred. So, broadly, what we see in this election here is the NDP held in the north, with the sole exception of Timmins, which flipped extremely hard to the PCs. Probably a good combination of a very good local campaign there and a very bad local NDP campaign, considering the rest of Northern Ontario didn't meaningfully change or meaningfully move away from the NDP. Now, that is not to say the NDP didn't lose ground. They did. They lost ground everywhere in Northern Ontario, but not quite as much as they did in Timmins. They did terrible in Timmins. The other big story in Northern Ontario is the Liberals got completely routed out of Thunder Bay, coming in second place in Thunder Bay Superior and Thunder Bay Token. Sorry, the pronunciations, they're kind of strange names. Honestly, there's probably similar to Kiwatanuga, which I think I'm pronouncing mostly correct. It's just like that the word's probably pronounced exactly how you think it's pronounced, but it looks weird in English, so you don't pronounce it properly when you read it. Anyways, that's the story in the Northern Ontario. NDP got some punches, but not a big router much. Really, it's mostly the case the Liberals getting wiped out. Eastern Ontario, over here, really not much has changed. The Liberals took Kingston and the Isles back from the NDP. NDP held Ottawa Centre. They did lose Ottawa Vanier to the Liberals as well, which not that surprising. But the big surprise here is the surprise NDP win in Ottawa West Nepean, which nobody, not myself, not 330 Canada, not iPolitics, not, maybe CBC, but they didn't project riding levels. No one had forecast the NDP could even win that seat. Well, strictly speaking, I think the 338 had a 1% chance for the NDP, but I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think forecasting percent likelihoods is silly because you can't verify them, so you don't know if your model's is correct or not. It's dumb. But anyways, so there's a surprise win there. Not that it really changed much. GTA, complete rout for the PCs. The only holdout that is not going to the PCs is Oshawa, which went NDP. I think that might have been an NDP pickup, but I'm not 100% certain. Not that it particularly matters. Downtown Toronto, there was a surprise NDP pickup in Humber River Black Creek, though again, not that surprising. It is a three-way vote split, so. Otherwise, the big story here is that the Liberals did a much worse in Toronto than projected by most people. And the NDP did much better in Toronto than projected. And specifically, the NDP vote was much more concentrated in these very urban, very downtown ridings, allowing them to hold most of them. For Southern Ontario, the story is not too surprising. Urban, London, Ontario, Niagara, the most urban parts of Kitchener-Waterloo, most of Hamilton, and half of Windsor. The most urban part of Windsor, I believe, went NDP. The surprise is how much Windsor-Tecumseh went to the PCs, and this pickup by Independent in Haldimand, Norfolk. Now, some might argue the PC pickup of Hamilton Ancaster, I believe that's this writing, is a bit of a surprise, but not really. My understanding is they had quite a popular incumbent that was unceremoniously kicked out of the party just before the race, the NDP that is. So they ran a fresh candidate, and that NDP candidate ran as a spoiler, and the NDP vote share declined in the region, and the PC vote share went up in the region. So it's not that surprising that the PCs ended up pulling out. They don't have a big lead. It was a much of a case that I think that only went to PC because of a spoiler candidate. Otherwise, Southern Ontario, not too surprising, though I will note actually one more surprise is how hard Mike Schreiner won in Guelph. In 2018, he won narrowly. This time he won decisively. Now, I think part of that is strategic voting from Liberals and NDP voters, but also it could very well be there are voters from Guelph who liked the Greens but didn't think the Greens could win, but now that the Green, Mike Schreiner, proved he could win the riding, they come towards to vote him to keep him in power. I think that is a very likely result here. So overall, not too much changed. So now how do the models do? How did everyone do? Now let's go here. Spreadsheet time. Fun. I will zoom in a bit because it is a bit small. So I will note here, I'm putting an asterisk on the 338 Canada results because I don't know why he did this, but he did update his website to the actual election results on June 3rd. And I can't find a good... The Wayback Machine only has so much data for his last projection before the election. So this is the best filling I could have for his, based off what I found in the Wayback Machine. I will note too that his seat projection accuracy is probably being skewed upwards because this only... No. The seat projection accuracy is correct. I will amend that. That is correct because he did post it on his website. And theoretically, if I wanted to, I could reverse engineer his regional numbers by using his website numbers for each riding. But that would be much more complicated. So I'm not doing that. These are best approximations. If Philip Fournier himself really does not like this, just throw me your data and I can amend it in a footnote. Otherwise, let's get into this. So overall, in Ontario, I did the best for polling accuracy. And I will just quickly run down here. So we have 338 Canada, Bagwell Polling, which is myself, CBC, iPolitics / Main Street, and the 10-day rolling polling average, except the last couple polls that I didn't include in my model. I'm excluding in this because I don't know. I did. So, as we can see here, and I'm using 2 decimal places for myself because I have them. Everyone else has rounded to whatever decimal places they rounded because I can only use what decimal places exist. So, I did the best popular vote-wise for mean squared error, and just to help, the formula is right here in case anyone cares. But in case you're not familiar, mean squared error is just a statistical measurement of error. You basically take the actual result minus what your model projected, square it, and then add it up across all possible parts of the model. So we have 7 parties, so there's 7 results. I will note for the cases of CBC and iPolitics, I have grouped Ontario, New Blue, and Other as one column because CBC and iPolitics did not independently project the Ontario or New Blues. So with this, I have by far the lowest national or province-wide. Oh, this is Canada. That's wrong. Ontario. I have the lowest provincial error, though I also have the least seat accuracy. And I'll get back to this, so just put a footnote on that, but there is a reason, I think, why I have a big miss on seats relative to my vote share. Because I'm very close on the vote share. I'm only a little off on pretty much every party. Whereas you look at CBC, they are quite off the PCs, or you look at the 338, he's quite off the Liberals. Very off the Ontario Party, relatively speaking. I'm very close to the Ontario Party's numbers, which I take a special pride in because, the Ontario Party was not properly forecast in most polls, so it was not the easiest thing to forecast. Now, let's move into Northern Ontario. And above here, this, just to be clear, this is what the actual vote share is. In Northern Ontario, everyone did really bad. By no means 44, which is my case, mean squared error. That's really high. That's quite a bad result. Why is this so high? Well, really, this is so high primarily because the Liberals did unexpectedly really bad. As you can see, the rolling polling average, CBC, myself, 338 Canada, all projected around 16, 17. For the Liberals, they did about 11. They did very bad. Similarly, the NDP outperformed polling. And other than 338, no one had properly corrected for that. And in the case of 338, he significantly undermodeled the Conservatives in Northern Ontario. I have to assume that might be he considers Northern Ontario a different combination of ridings than I do, because that is a quite big miss on his part. The mean squared error of 80 is quite bad, even when the best is 44. That is quite a big miss. Especially considering his model technically did worse than no model, which is the 10-day rolling polling average. Now we go to Eastern Ontario. Here, well, everyone did okay. Technically, though, everyone did worse than the rolling polling average, which is a bit awkward. Oops. Again, not too much difference. My model slightly overprojected the PCs in Eastern Ontario, but not too much. Slightly underestimated the NDP. Not too much. Overall, fairly happy with this. GTA. Again, this time, actually, CBC, or 338 Canada had the best result. In GTA, I had slightly better seat projection accuracy, for once. This is the only time my seat projection accuracy was better. I was only off by 1. Feel pretty good about that one. Again, the story here is really the NDP did a lot worse in the GTA than everyone expected. I guess CBC did not too bad on that, but it's mostly the NDP did worse and the Conservatives did better than projected. Is what it is. To Toronto. Again, I had the best polling error, or the least model error, though I had the most seat error. It is what it is. And a lot of people did actually worse than the rolling polling average. A bit awkward again. Now, again, this could all... Toronto really shouldn't be one where the division is weird, because it is generally defined as just the 416, so you shouldn't be getting confused by that. Or there shouldn't be confusion by that. Overall here, well, it just seems to be the case that, the NDP outperformed polls, and the Liberals did worse. Conservatives did about the fine, and NDP, or the Greens, slightly underperformed as well. Which really is the story of a lot of the election, where the NDP slightly overperformed the Liberals. I think that is strategic voting, to be honest, from Liberals to NDP, but we'll see going forward. Hamilton area, Halton, Niagara. I had quite a big miss because I basically miscalled all of Niagara. Awkward. And I also miscast both of the two of the ridings in Hamilton. I wasn't my brightest night. The one of them, I will admit, was in margin of error. There, two of them were in margin of error, so it's not as bad, but a wrong call is a wrong call. It doesn't matter if it's margin of error. So here, I, again, had the least vote share error. Wow. Feel good about that one. Again. And, I mean, quite a lot lower than everybody else, too. Here, the polling was pretty close on the NDP and pretty close on the Liberals. Way off on the Greens. Exactly right for the Ontario Party. It was perfect. And again, I'll put an asterisk on the Ontario Party numbers and the Blue Party numbers and the rolling polling average, because that's my projection from the other category. But as you can see, basically across the board, my projection of breaking up the Ontario Party and the New Blues from other is pretty close, even in the rolling polling average, without any other fancy math involved. So I'll take that as another victory as well. Just getting all the victories today, except seat accuracy, where I did terrible. Well, not terrible, but not great. But again, I'll put a pin on that because I know why, or I have a theory. But overall, not too surprising. Mostly the Conservatives are better than everyone projected, myself included. That's most of the error that happened in Hamilton, Niagara. And out the Southwest, again, I had the least polling error. And I will also note, some of you keen-eyed viewers might have noticed, that essentially for all the subregions, every single person has done worse than Ontario as a whole. And that is to be expected because different pollsters use different definitions for different subregions. So there's that kind of error. Sub-summary, like the margin of error on a subregion in a poll is higher, so there's more uncertainty in the measurement versus Ontario as a whole because it's a small sample size. So that is to be expected that the smaller numbers are going to have, the smaller subsamples are going to have more error post hoc than the total. That is just to be expected. So what happened in Southern Ontario? Well, NDP almost exactly performed as expected by polling. Greens slightly underperformed. New Blues almost exactly performed. Ontario Party slightly underperformed, though you could put an asterisk on that and say that's expected because, this was a projection, not generally actually results. Other slightly or massively overperformed, mostly because of the unexpected. No, in hindsight, really shouldn't have been that unexpected. Independent win in Hamilton, Norfolk, because it turns out a lot of people missed this. She was endorsed by the previous Conservative holding the riding, who did help her campaign. So that is a very big assistance, especially since my understanding is the previous incumbent was quite popular. But overall, the Conservatives outperformed polling, and the Liberals underperformed polling. And that can be seen quite heavily in the mean squared error. So overall, what does this tell us? Well, the Liberals underperformed, NDP slightly overperformed, Conservatives massively overperformed polling, Greens underperformed, Ontario Party overperformed, New Blues and other slightly underperformed, though again, you can put asterisks on these. Other, New Blue in Ontario and other. Put an asterisk on all those three. If you group them together, then it's probably not that big of a difference. generally speaking, you shouldn't be that surprised that a conservative party is going to outperform polling. I can't tell you why. Like, specifically, there are some theories, but generally speaking, right-wing parties always overperform polling. Or, in other words, they are almost always underestimated by polls. It's kind of hard to explain. Specifically, some people argue there's a Shaitori effect, which, for those unaware, is essentially the argument that conservative voters, because of social peer pressure, are unwilling to publicly say to pollsters their opinion. That could be very well true. For example, how many conservatives are willing to publicly tell people that they are pro-life? There's not. Now, again, one example. The other possibilities are conservative voters are more likely to vote in general, i.e. they have a higher margin propensity to vote. So it's not necessarily a case that they are being underpolled because they're not answering polls or they're lying to polls, but they're just more likely to actually vote, and a lot of left-wing supporters just don't vote. That could be true. Again, that's not really a very satisfying result, especially right now, where by polling, in this particular election, that is probably more true than normal because the Ontario PCs were really polling high in the older demographic, which are more likely to vote. Now, for how long are they more likely to vote? Not 100% certain, because you do have to consider, at least in the future, as the numbers of 70, 80-year-olds increase relative to the rest of the population, that actually might start decreasing a bit because there's a higher percentage of 70, 80, 90-year-olds who are either senile or just physically too unwell to get out to vote. Or too unwell to think to book a mail-in vote ballot. Though, how much that factors, I don't know. So overall, I'm pretty content with the model, though there is one major thing I noticed. And we'll go back to... Whoop, that is not what I wanted to do. We're going back to here. So, we will notice here, and actually, I will bring up my projection map as well. So we have my projection here. This is my last projection. We will notice that if we split screen this with the power of technology, wow, isn't that spicy? With the power of technology, we'll notice one big thing. Specifically, Southern Ontario. We'll move this over so it's a bit easier to see. I projected Niagara wrong. I projected Kitchener-Waterloo wrong. I predicted London wrong. That is 7 ridings. That is a significant percentage of my error. Now, why might I have projected those wrong? Well, the answer to that is actually pretty simple. Bear with me one second. It's about 5.6 percentage points of my error is those 7 ridings being forecast wrong. Why might that be the case? Well, if we go back to here, and we scroll down to these 2 areas, we'll note, I wasn't off on the vote share in Hamilton, Niagara, but I had 4 ridings off in Hamilton, Niagara. And I actually underestimated the PCs there. So I was correct on the NDP, and I underestimated the PCs. So you would assume, then, since I have 4 ridings wrong here, this one, and these 4, technically I have this one wrong too, but that's, we're not counting that one for a second. Well, the reason I have come up with here is my model doesn't presently consider rural versus urban. Now, not every single pollster in Canada will poll rural versus urban, but some do. My model doesn't currently consider it because I cannot come up with a good way to classify what is an urban or rural riding. I know some people, like 338 Canada, use urbanicity. That's a weird word, but urbanization rate or population density. My problem with that is population density is really the only easy one we have access to. And what is the cutoff there? I don't know. But seeing where I got almost all of my error in this election for seat projections, not popular vote, seat projections, is urban-rural dichotomy, specifically in Southern Ontario. We're at 8 seats, not 7, I miscounted. So 2 in London, 2 in Kitchener-Waterloo, 3 in Niagara, 1 in Hamilton, 8 seats. About 6 percentage points of my seat error. And if we go back here, that would put me almost on par with 338 Canada, just that alone. And then you could possibly argue Kingston in the Isles, also part of that. Which, if we add that one in, and assume rural-urban is the correction needed to fix that, that is almost all of my seat projection error compared to 338 Canada. Since I do not consider it, I essentially smooth out the NDP support in Southern Ontario here, and I also smooth out Conservative support, when in reality, the Conservatives are much more popular in rural areas, and the NDP are much more popular in urban areas. It is very, very significant. That seems to be most of my error, and, well, hopefully, once I add that in, which I plan on going to for the Quebec election in the fall, that, and maybe the US election, it really depends on how the data is. I'm pretty sure I have the data available for the Quebec one. That should fix most of my seat projection error. Now, I still won't get every single seat correct because wild things happen. You get a situation where Timmins looks like it's going to be a toss-up, and suddenly the PC candidate blows out by like 40 percentage points. Oh, well, that's unexpected. Or you have an independent show up in Hamilton, Norfolk, who no one could have possibly expected to win, and they win. Even though I was even talking about pre-election how a random independent can actually win, such as Elizabeth McRossin. So, it turns out they exist. It happened in Ontario too, but it is what it is. So where does this leave this? Well, I will say, since my model does my model does a fantastic job of projecting vote share. Right now, until I have an election under the belt with the new system, and I will note the rural-urban should not affect this one iota. Demographic data, such as gender, age, income, education status, rural-urban, that doesn't affect vote share numbers, or it should not affect vote share numbers in your model. If it does, you're doing something wrong. What that affects is who wins which riding. So I will have to look into that and try to figure out how to project that. That is clearly a failing that I've noticed in this, and I believe will actually account for almost the entirety of my error. Or almost the entirety of the difference between myself and 338 and seat projection error. I will still lead him in popular vote projection. Woohoo! That said, I hope everyone found this interesting, and if you have any comments about my model or any observations made over the coverage, or, well, you just want to, I don't know, say things in the comments, ask me questions, feel free. I love all the comments. They're always wonderful. Otherwise, if you like the video, well, I mean, press the like button, press the subscribe button. I hear there's even a bell button you can press. Those are always good. Share with your friends, let them see all the stuff. I think videos like this, or equivalent blog posts if you're doing it on a blog, are really important when you're talking about election forecasting, because my ability to talk to you, the audience, about whatever my model's projecting is only as good as your confidence that I'm actually doing a good job, that I'm actually trying to get the correct result and not just model for advantage. Historically, I've gotten a lot of complaints that I am trying to model for advantage, and, well, I'm not. But people are only as good as they let people criticize them. If you deny criticism, you cannot improve. So, I welcome any and all criticism. Even if it's dumb and you're just attacking me personally, go for it. I'll get a good chuckle at the very least. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful day.